Hey folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Now tonight we travel into the mountains, forest, isolated communities, and rural back roads of Tennessee, a state with a long and complex history of unexplained encounters. And from the Appalachian highlands in the east to the isolated woodlands of Middle Tennessee, witnesses have reported enormous upright creatures, mysterious winged humanoids, glowing eyes, phantom screams, cloaked entities, and beings that seem capable of moving between our physical world and another reality. Now, some of these encounters resemble familiar cryptid reports. Others contain elements of missing time, dimensional displacement, supernatural forewarning, and psychological trauma. Now, several of the witnesses described this distinct feeling that they were being watched before anything even appeared. Others reported that the environment became unusually quiet, oppressive, and distorted. And in some cases, the entity seems curious. In others, it appears threatening or completely indifferent to the human beings observing it. What are these witnesses encountering? Are these undiscovered animals, interdimensional beings, supernatural manifestations, or physical creatures capable of abilities we just don't yet understand? So tonight, we examine 8 extraordinary reports from across Tennessee. This is Unexplained Tennessee. Now, our first report comes from Perry County near the community of Linden in Middle Tennessee. The witness was a widow who had moved to the area with her children approximately 1 year before the encounter. Now, her intention was to live quietly and independently on an off-grid homestead. Now, soon after arriving, however, the family began experiencing strange activity around the property. The witness stated, "I moved to Linden, Tennessee in Perry County about a year ago with my children. I'm a widow who was simply trying to live off-grid on a homestead. We would hear howls, knocks, and other strange sounds, but we didn't think much of them at first. The local people refused to come to our little homestead. Eventually, we found someone willing to deliver hay, but he would only come during the daylight hours. Now, occasionally, we would see a white blur or have a heavy rock land near us, but nothing serious ever happened. A new neighbor eventually moved in onto the property about 20 acres away from us. Horrendous things began happening there. they found dead animals and discovered damage to their property. They came to us and asked us to investigate. I looked around their property, but I couldn't explain what was terrorizing them. However, they drank and smoked heavily, so I initially chalked their claims up to that. Now, my son later mentioned the strange activity to a local man he works with. The man turned, looked him directly in the eye and said, "It's the Cherokee Devil." I had to look that name up. We still tried to dismiss the idea until spring arrived. We were walking along the creek on our property and decided to separate so we could find the spring that feeds it. Now, my 22-year-old son suddenly began waving and calling out, "Hey, wait up for me." I looked at him and realized he was not facing me. I turned toward the direction he was looking and saw what appeared to be a whitish-gray Bigfoot. The creature turned and began moving toward my son. I yelled, "Hey, I'm over here. That's not me." My son immediately ran toward me because I had the gun, and I am mama. So the creature looked directly at him and simply stared. I told it, "Leave us alone, and we'll leave you alone. I had no issues with you. I only have issues with people." It didn't attack us. I do not want people coming here and trying to hurt it because it has never touched any of my animals. If one of our animals dies because of the weather or another natural cause, we carry the carcass to an area where we believe the creature sleeps. Now, I'm curious whether you have heard of this creature and what you can tell me about it. Now, the witness later provided an update after receiving information concerning Tsul'kalu', a powerful figure in Cherokee tradition, sometimes described as a giant associated with the mountains, hunting, and remote wilderness. She told me, "It is crazy. I read the link and information you forwarded to me. I have spoken with local Cherokee people here, and they seem surprised that it has left me alone." Now, the gravel haulers have what they call a churn pit here. Apparently, this devil has destroyed some of their equipment and damaged dump trucks so badly that several had to be replaced. They have placed traps and installed security, but they have not caught it yet, so I hope they don't. I noticed that the activity only starts when they begin dynamiting the ridge. Sorry, but I'm rooting for the Cherokee Devil. Now, this report presents several characteristics frequently associated with Bigfoot and other large unidentified forest beings. The family heard howls and knocking sounds. Rocks were apparently thrown near them, and white forms were seen moving around the property. Now, local residents also seem reluctant to visit the homestead after dark. Most interestingly, the creature appeared near a creek and may have temporarily confused the witness's son by imitating, or positioning itself near what he believed was his mother. Now, the witness did not describe the entity as immediately hostile. When directly addressed, it stopped and stared at her rather than attacking. Activity reportedly intensified when the nearby ridge was disturbed by dynamiting and industrial work. Now, similar patterns have been reported in other locations where logging, mining, excavation, and construction disrupted isolated habitats. Was the creature merely defending its territory, or was something older and much more complex connected to the land? Now, the next report takes us to Roan Mountain in eastern Tennessee. This is an area where I'm familiar on the North Carolina side because my family is from there. The witness, identified as R, had grown up near Mobile, Alabama. Now, until his mid-20s, he had spent little time at high elevations. Sometime between mid-1980s and early 1990s, he traveled with his wife to visit his sister who had moved to Roan Mountain. Now, one evening, the witness stepped outside and experienced an encounter that had combined an enormous Bigfoot-like being with an apparent distortion in time and space. He stated, "The only person I ever told about this was my wife at the time, who is now my ex-wife. She laughed and accused me of making the whole thing up. And before I got into the encounter itself, I should give a little background. And I was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1964. Until I was in my mid-20s, I had never been on ground much higher than a couple hundred feet above sea level. Now, sometime between the mid-1980s and early 1990s, my sister got married and moved to Roan Mountain in eastern Tennessee. My wife and I went up there to visit her for a week. Now, for the first few days, we drove around, saw the sights, and enjoyed the mountains. Then we spent one day there hanging out around the house. That evening, we had a few cold drinks and fired up the grill. Later that night, around 9 p.m., I stepped out onto the back porch to get another beer. That was when I noticed about a half a dozen deer standing in the field behind the house, roughly 100 yards away. One of them had a nice rack, but I could not make out how many points it had. I slipped off the porch and eased over to the corner of the fence, which put me about 60 to 70 yards from the deer. I stood there against the fence watching them. The big buck looked like a 10-point at minimum, probably a 200 class deer. But then I noticed the moon. When I say I noticed it, I mean I really noticed it. It was huge. It looked closer than I'd ever seen it before. Now, I had been out in the Gulf of Mexico at night, far away from city lights, and I had seen the moon with great detail using only my naked eye. But that night on Roan Mountain, I finally understood that the word awesome meant. I understood what it meant to be awestruck. I was supposed to be watching the deer, but I couldn't take my eye off that huge, glowing, yellow-orange ball of light. It seemed almost close enough to touch. I thought I had been standing there for about 20 minutes. Later, I realized I had been there for close to an hour. Now, after a while, I began to feel a tickling sensation on the back of my neck. I shrugged my shoulders and turned my neck a couple of times, trying to shake loose whatever I thought was touching me. Just then, the deer spooked and bounded away. The noise finally broke my gaze from the moon. That was when I realized I had probably been outside long enough. I decided to go back inside. I took one last look at the moon and mumbled, "Wow," because of the beauty of the sun-reflecting satellite orbiting our world. But then it hit me. I felt the hot breath of some huge creature on the back of my neck. And at the same instant, I heard or felt the deepest chest rumbling I'd ever experienced. I turned to my right, looked over my shoulder. At first, all I could see was black as far as my peripheral vision allowed. It was all Bigfoot. This happened in a split second. When I got my head around far enough, I realized my face was maybe 8 to 10 inches from the creature's upper abdomen. Looking upward, I saw that its pectoral muscles stuck out from its chest almost 6 inches. They were massive. Its chest was every bit of 4.5 feet wide. Its shoulders looked as big as basketballs, adding another foot or two on each side. From shoulder to shoulder, the thing had to be at least 6 foot wide. I didn't get a good look at the hands or face, but its arms were probably even more impressive than its chest and shoulder. If Hulk Hogan had 22-inch arms, this creature had 28 to 30-inch arms. Its forearms would make Popeye jealous. The arms were covered in long, dark hair, maybe 4 to 6 inches in length. If I had to estimate, this being was around 10 foot tall, weighed about 700 to 800 pounds. As for its face, from my angle, all I could make out was a squared-off, bearded chin. I could not see its nose, ears, eyes, brow ridge, or head shape. I cannot say whether it looked more like a man or an ape. Its arms seemed more ape-like, but its chest was more human-like, only hairier than most men. This is where the story becomes even stranger. As I said, it all happened in a split second, and as I spun around and looked up, the creature rose from a bent-over position to stand upright. At the same time, it took a step back and to its right. As it pulled its left leg over its right, it looked as though it were slipping through a slit in a green screen. I don't know if it was a portal, an interdimensional doorway, or something else entirely. All I know is that this huge thing vanished within a split second. Now, there was no foul smell associated with it. There was a slight musty odor, but it reminded me of the smell of that a horse gives off. You could smell it, but you wouldn't call it a stench. I will say this. I hear a lot of people say these beings are evil, demonic, or something similar, and maybe they are. I can only speak from my experience. I got the impression that this creature was intelligent and that it somehow appreciated my interest in the moon. The it made me feel the same way I felt when I had done something good and made my grandfather proud. He would give me the same approving. Of course, my grandfather never had the same volume or power behind it like this thing did. Now, the physical description of this account is remarkable. The witness estimated that the entity stood approximately 10 feet tall, with the chest several feet wide or extraordinarily muscular arms. Yet the most unusual elements were not physical. The witness believed that approximately 20 minutes had passed while he watched the moon. Now, he later discovered that he had been outside for nearly an hour. Now, whether this represented distraction, altered perception, or actual missing time remains unknown. The creature's approached closely enough to breathe on the witness's neck, but it did not attack him. It appeared to vocalize in a way that the witness interpreted as approving or reassuring. Then, instead of running into the forest, a massive being seemed to step sideways and disappear through a narrow opening in reality. This raises a question that continues to appear in Bigfoot research. Are some of these beings purely biological animals, or are they certain encounters connected to portals, dimensional shifts, cloaking abilities, and changes in human perception? Now, our third case involves a witness who reported 2 encounters with what appeared to be the same enormous canine humanoid. Now, the first sighting occurred while the witness was in 7th grade. The second took place several years later during the summer before the witness's senior year of high school. The witness stated, "Now, when I was in 7th grade in eastern Tennessee, I was outside with my dog lying on the dirt mound and looking at the clouds to pass the time. It was around 5:30 p.m. when my dog started barking and pulling at the leash. We lived in the countryside, so we had the woods surrounding one half of our house. Now, I tried hushing my beagle, but she persisted. I stood up and looked in the direction she was facing. I said, 'Look, there isn't anything there.' And as I said that, a large black creature with a canid body sprinted out of the woods. Now, this creature had thin fur that was so black that it had a pearlescent appearance, almost like a purple tint. Its eyes were a medium shade of yellow. Its legs were crooked backward, and its hands were long and slender. It stood about 7 feet tall when upright on its hind legs. And when it dropped on all 4 limbs, its back had an aggressive hunch, but it still maintained a fluid motion. Every step seemed pre-calculated. As it sprinted past, it tilted its head toward me as though it was aware of my presence, but could not be bothered by the fact that I was standing there. It then jumped over a 4-foot cattle fence without much difficulty. I am a senior in high school now, and just last summer I had another experience. I had been working with my father in his shed where we repaired motors and other equipment. I left my phone inside the shed. Now, my friend was staying overnight, so we headed back down to the shed when I realized I'd forgotten the phone. It was approximately 10 p.m., completely dark, and around the same time of the year as my previous encounter. We were standing outside the front of the shed trying to get the key into the lock when we heard rustling in the brush near the woods. It was very faint and sounded almost like a breeze moving through the leaves. My friend and I both heard it, so we turned our flashlights toward the brush. There, in the light vegetation, stood a pitch-black shape. The yellow eyes destroy my mind every time I remember that moment. My friend said, "You see that, right?" By that time, I was already sprinting towards the house. Seeing the creature and knowing that it had been silently watching us tore my mind apart. It was so quiet. I had a mental breakdown as soon as I entered the house. I have never experienced such an intense reaction to anything. And from that point forward, every time I entered the woods, I felt as though something was watching me. I know that sounds crazy, and I understand that. I struggle with telling anyone, and this is the first time I've ever reached out in search of similar experiences. Now, the creature in this report displayed several characteristics commonly associated with upright canine or dogman encounters. It had a canid body, dark black fur, yellow eyes, unusually long hands, and rear legs that appeared to bend backwards. It could stand approximately 7 foot tall, but also capable of dropping onto all four limbs without losing speed or coordination. During the first encounter, it ran past the witness and cleared a 4 foot livestock fence with little effort. During the second encounter, he remained motionless and concealed in the brush, silently observing the witness and his friend. Now, the emotional response was immediate and severe. The witness described having a mental breakdown after reaching the house. In many unexplained creature reports, the fear experienced by the witness seems disproportionate to the visible behavior of the entity. Sometimes the being does not attack, growl, or pursue. It just merely watches. Could this reaction be caused by the shock of the encountering the impossible animal? Or do some of these entities produce a psychological or physiological effect in those who see them? Now, this next report occurred in Antioch, Tennessee in 1993. Unlike the previous encounters, this entity did not appear to possess fur, feathers, or any clearly visible body surface. Instead, it seemed to be almost completely transparent. Now, the witness described seeing the outline of a human-sized figure through which the trees and sky remained visible. The witness stated, "Hi, in 1993, I was living in Antioch, Tennessee. One afternoon at approximately 3 p.m., I took my dog into the front yard so he could relieve himself. Most of the people in the surrounding homes were away at work, and the neighborhood was unusually quiet. Almost immediately, I developed the unmistakable feeling that something was watching me. I could not explain why, but the sensation was strong enough to make me stop and search the area. My attention was drawn toward a wooded section directly in front of the house. At first, I could not see anything unusual. Then I heard leaves and branches rustling somewhere among the trees. The sound did not seem to be coming from the ground, so I began looking higher and gradually scanned the treetops. My eyesight was very good at the time. I was completely sober, did not use drugs, and did not consume any alcohol. When I looked near the top of the trees, I saw something crouched among the upper branches. The only way I can describe it is comparing it to the cloaked creature in the movie Predator. I do not remember whether I had even seen the movie at that point, but the comparison is the best description I can offer. The figure appeared almost invisible. I could see the outline and general shape of its body, but I could also see the surrounding tree and skies through it. It was approximately the size of a grown man. What made the sight even more impossible was its position. It was crouched near the very top of a tree among branches that did not appear strong enough to support the weight of an ordinary person. Despite the figure's size, the branches beneath it did not bend or break. I stood in the yard staring at it, trying to understand what I was seeing. The figure remained motionless and appeared to be watching me from above. Now, for reasons I still can't explain, fear did not immediately take over. Instead, I released the dog's leash, shouted, "Hey," and began running towards it. The moment I charged forward, the figure moved. It began running across the tops of the trees with incredible speed. It did not climb down or leap to the ground. It traveled from one treetop to another as though the thin branches formed a solid pathway beneath it. The movement was so fast and fluid that I had difficulty following it with my eyes. Now, branches and leaves shifted as it passed, but the creature itself remained almost immediately transparent, or completely transparent. I could still make out its distorted outline as it moved through the canopy. Now, after running a short distance, I suddenly realized what I was doing. I remember thinking, what in the world are you doing chasing this thing? I stopped and continued watching it. The figure also stopped approximately 50 yards from where I had first seen it. It turned around and appeared to look directly back at me. Although I couldn't see any facial features, I had no doubt that its attention was focused on me. After pausing for several seconds, it turned away and continued moving through the treetops. It traveled deeper into the woods until the outline disappeared completely among the branches. Now, I remained there staring into the trees, but I never saw it again. Now, once the encounter was over, the full impact of what had happened just struck me. It scared the hell out of me. I knew that I had seen something approximately human in size, but nearly invisible, moving across the branches that should not have been able to support it. For many years, I never told anyone about the experience because I was certain people would think I was nuts. Even now, I can't explain what the figure was, how it concealed itself, or how it moved so quickly through the treetops. I only know that it was real. It was watching me, and it reacted the moment I ran toward it. Now, this report contains several characteristics found in what we call the glimmer man or cloaked human encounter, or humanoid encounter. Witnesses typically describe a distortion resembling heat waves, rippling glass, clear gelatin, or advanced camouflage. Now, the outline of the figure remained visible, but its surroundings can be seen through its body. Now, the Antioch entity also appeared capable of moving across the highest branches of the trees without breaking them or causing them to bend beneath its weight. The witness heard movement in the canopy, so the entity interacted with the physical environment, yet its body appeared almost transparent, and its weight did not seem consistent with its human-like size. The figure also demonstrated awareness and intelligence, and when the witness stopped chasing it, the entity stopped as well, turned around, and looked back at him. This did not seem like the behavior of an ordinary animal fleeing from danger. It seemed deliberate. Now, the next account occurred in an abandoned community somewhere in northeastern Tennessee. The exact location was not disclosed, but the witness described a 5-foot-tall bipedal creature covered in matted brownish black hair. Its most disturbing features were its smooth, flat face and glowing red eyes. The witness stated, "What did I see? I still cannot say with any certainty. What I can say is that it was approximately 5 foot tall, stood upright on two legs, and had glowing red eyes set in a strangely flat face. We encountered it in an abandoned town in northeastern Tennessee, in an area that already felt isolated and forgotten. The creature was covered in brown-black hair or fur that appeared thick, tangled, and badly matted. Its lower legs were obscured by the roadside ditch in which it was standing, so we never were able to get a clear look at its feet or the exact shape of its legs. Its upper limbs, however, moved in a distinctly human-like manner. It seemed to be using them as though hands were attached rather than paws or claws. When we first noticed it, the creature was scrambling around on the embankment directly in front of it, apparently searching for something. It wasn't digging into the ground. The movements reminded me more of a person who had dropped a piece of jewelry or another small object in the grass and was carefully trying to locate it. We slowed the car and directed our bright light toward it. Even under the illumination, I could not make out any visible mouth or nose. Its face appeared unusually smooth and featureless except for the eyes. The creature did not flinch, turn away, or move a muscle as we passed and slowed down for the better look. It seemed completely unconcerned by our presence. Now, oddly enough, it did not appear threatening or aggressive. Despite its unnatural appearance, I did not feel that it was preparing to attack us. It simply stood there, frozen in place, staring in our direction while remaining focused on whatever had drawn its attention to the embankment. As strange and as cliche as it may sound, the eyes did not appear red because of ordinary reflected light. They seemed to be glowing from within, producing its own steady illumination. Even assuming it was merely eyeshine, the only animal in that area that I know red eyeshine is the night heron. There's no possibility that what we saw was a bird. Someone later suggested the creature may have been a Mothman type entity. I did not see any wings, although it was dark, and it is possible that the wings could have been folded against its body or concealed beneath the thick matted covering. Nothing about the encounter gave us enough time or visibility to make a definite identification. I should also mention that something bearing a similar description was reportedly seen in the region many years ago. According to local people I later spoke with, these sightings dated back to the 1920s. Now, I do not know whether the reports are connected, but the similarities were difficult to dismiss. The encounter lasted only a short time, yet the image of the creature has remained with me. Its flat, nearly featureless face, glowing eyes, and strangely deliberate hand movements were unlike anything I'd ever seen in the Tennessee wilderness. Whatever it was, it did not resemble any known animal native to the area. Now, the creature's behavior is one of the most intriguing aspects of this report. It was not feeding, digging, or attempting to conceal itself. It appeared to be using its hands to search carefully through the vegetation for a small object. Even when illuminated by the vehicle's bright lights, the being didn't run. Its face appeared flat and almost completely featureless. No mouth or nose could be seen. Only the red eyes were clearly visible. Now, the witness believed the eyes produced their own illumination rather than reflecting the vehicle's lights. Similar reports of glowing-eyed, featureless humanoids have emerged from isolated roads, abandoned settlements, and wood areas throughout Appalachia. Some are described as hairy, while others appear smooth-skinned or shadow-like. The witness also learned of a potentially similar creature reported in the same region during the 1920s. Was this an isolated encounter? Or did the witness see an entity that has been present in the region for generations? Now, this next report returns us to Roan Mountain area. The encounter occurred one evening in 2010 as three witnesses traveled along a dark two-lane road after a birthday dinner. Now, the driver was accompanied by her former partner and his son. And as they approached a cemetery located above the roadway, they saw what initially appeared to be a large white ball moving onto the highway. The object then began approaching them. And as the distance closed, the witnesses realized that it was not a ball. It was a creature. The primary witness described the being as a bizarre combination of a human and reptile. It possessed two human-like arms and two legs connected to a thick alligator-like body. Its entire form was stark white, resembling the color of freshly fallen snow. The creature crawled low against the pavement, dragging or pulling itself forward on its stomach in a reptilian manner. The driver hoped that it would leave the roadway and disappear into the surrounding woods. Instead, it continued moving directly towards their vehicle. She believed that a collision was inevitable and slammed on the brakes. Immediately before reaching the front bumper, the creature reportedly began spinning violently. The witness compared the movement to a small tornado or a rapidly rotating mass. The figure seemed certain to strike the front of the car. Instead, it passed beneath the bumper and disappeared under the radiator area. The three witnesses remained inside the vehicle, shaken and terrified. They expected to hear an impact or feel the vehicle strike the creature, but there was no sound, no physical jolt, or no visible evidence of a collision. When they looked behind them, the entity was gone. The driver continued to describe the being as having two human-like arms, two legs with a reptilian midsection resembled that of an alligator. Its movements were unlike those of any known animal she had ever encountered. All three witnesses agreed that whatever crossed the road that night did not seem to be a normal living creature. The former partner later stated that time seemed to stand still during the incident. Everything appeared to slow down, creating the impression that the encounter lasted much longer than it actually had. The witnesses also recalled experiencing an intense feeling of dread before the creature appeared. They described the atmosphere as deeply oppressive, as though something evil or threatening was present nearby. That sensation intensified as they approached the cemetery and remained with them throughout the encounter. Even after the creature vanished, the witnesses continued to feel frightened and disturbed. They were convinced that they had experienced something completely outside the natural world. Now, this encounter combined several highly unusual elements. The entity appeared to emerge from the direction of the cemetery. It possessed both human and reptilian characteristics. Its body was white. It crawled directly toward an approaching vehicle instead of attempting to escape. Immediately before contact, it transformed to a rapidly spinning shape and vanished beneath the vehicle without producing an impact. 3 people observed the event, reducing the likelihood that it was a momentary visual error experienced by a single witness. The reported slowing of time is also significant. Similar temporal distortions have been described during UFO encounters, cryptid sightings, apparitional experiences, and other episodes of high strangeness. Was the spinning motion a physical defensive response, a distortion surrounding the creature, or a moment the entity left our visible environment? Whatever happened on that road, the witness believed that the creature deliberately approached them. Now, the next encounter occurred on September 4th, 2022, during Labor Day weekend. The location was 800 block of Iron Bridge Road in Columbia, Tennessee. The witness, Garland B., had hosted a family cookout at his home. At approximately 9 p.m., he and his brother-in-law were sitting beneath the carport and talking about the evening's activities while the evening's activities were winding down. Now, Garland initially reported, "I saw something resembling the Mothman across the street from my home during Labor Day weekend in 2022. We had held a family cookout at my house, and by approximately 9 p.m., we were finishing the cleanup. My brother-in-law and I were sitting under the carport talking when I noticed what appeared to be a person standing near my neighbor's basement door. I knew my neighbor was not home at the time, so I stood up to get a better look and see what the individual was doing. I called out, 'Hey!' At that moment, a pair of wings unfolded from the figure's body. The creature then glided upward and landed on the roof of the house. Once on the roof, it began walking toward the opposite side. I moved in the direction it had gone, hoping to see it again, but it continued further away and disappeared from view. I searched the area, but I couldn't locate it. I had not seen anything similar since that night. I later learned that a Mothman-like creature had reportedly been sighted near State Route 840, approximately 25 miles north of my home. Now, I initially contacted Garland by email. He later telephoned me and provided additional details about the encounter. He explained that he noticed movement near his neighbor's basement entrance. Then he looked more closely and saw a dark human-like figure standing beside the basement door. Since Garland knew that the neighbor was away from the property, he stood and shouted, 'Hey!' The figure immediately unfurled a pair of massive feathered wings. It then slowly descended from the basement entrance and landed on the roof, ascended from the basement entrance and landed on the roof of the neighbor's house. And as Garland watched, he observed that the entity appeared to be covered entirely in dark feathers. The feathering extended from the top of his head down to the length of its body and over its legs. Now, he did not describe exposed skin, recognizable clothing, or any other clearly identifiable human facial features. Now, the winged humanoid remained standing on the roof for a short time before beginning to move across it. Now, Garland could hear distinct rustling and shuffling sounds as the creature walked over the roofing material. It eventually crossed toward the opposite side of the house and disappeared from view. Garland approached the neighboring property and moved in the direction the entity had traveled. Despite searching the area, he was unable to locate it again. He did not hear the sound of wings, see the figure fly away, or observe it descending from the roof. Now, during our telephone conversation, Garland became emotional while discussing the events that followed the sighting. Within approximately 1 year of the encounter, his mother, his aunt, and his neighbor, whose house the creature had stood beside, all passed away. Garland wondered whether the winged humanoid's appearance was somehow foreshadowed those deaths. He expressed a strong desire to understand what he had witnessed and why the entity had appeared near his home that particular night. Now, after watching the winged humanoid segment featured on Netflix Unsolved Mysteries, Garland felt compelled to contact the program and report his experience. The similarities between the entity he observed and the other reported Mothman-like beings convinced him that his sighting could be connected to the broader winged humanoid phenomenon. Now, I'm not convinced that Mothman and any other winged humanoid necessarily serve as harbingers of death, tragedy, or impending misfortune. Many winged humanoid sightings occur without any known tragedy following the event. However, Garland clearly believes that the entity's appearance may have been a portent connected to the deaths that occurred during the following year. The physical details are also noteworthy. The being appeared human-like while standing near the basement door. Only after Garland confronted it did the wings become visible. Now, the entity did not flap violently or launch itself into like a large bird. It reportedly unfolded its wings, slowly ascended, and landed on the roof. Once there, it walked across the house heavily enough to produce audible rustling and scuffling sounds. Was Garland observing the manifestation of a Mothman, or was this another form of feathered winged humanoid? Now, our final report takes us to an old farmhouse outside Jonesborough, Tennessee. The account was passed down through the family of a World War II veteran. It involved one of the veteran's former Navy shipmates, a man described as courageous and unafraid of physical danger. The witness had served aboard a Navy destroyer during the war and later returned to Tennessee. He eventually purchased a farmhouse surrounded by open land with a dense forest located directly behind the residence. Now, from the time the family moved into the house, unusual activity began occurring around the property. They heard unexplained knocking at the door late at night. When someone checked outside, no visitor was present. There were also strange noises and other unsettling incidents, although the family initially dismissed them as normal sounds of an aging rural home or animals moving across the property. One night, the man was awakened by a blood-curdling shriek coming from the forest behind the farmhouse. He described the scream as sounding like a woman being brutally attacked or murdered. It was loud, prolonged, and unlike anything he had recognized from the local wildlife. The man was not someone who frightened easily. He had survived wartime service and was accustomed to danger. He retrieved his shotgun, stepped outside, and began searching the backyard and the edge of the woods. And as he scanned the darkness near the tree line, he noticed a pair of yellowish eyes staring directly at him. Now, the eyes were not positioned 3 or 4 feet above the ground, where the eyes of a deer, dog, or other common animal might appear. They were approximately 7 feet above the ground. He could see a body outline or he could not see a body outline or recognizable silhouette. The darkness surrounding the eyes seemed impenetrable, and all he could see were the 2 yellow eyes staring steadily at him from the edge of the forest. He later said that the eyes appeared disturbingly human. They didn't move like the eyes of an animal. The unseen being showed no indication of fear, hesitation, or aggression. It simply stood there and watched him. The witness raised his shotgun, aimed directly between the eyes, and fired at close range. The blast should have struck something if it was standing near the trees. The figure did not fall. It did not recoil. It didn't cry out. It didn't even flinch. The yellow eyes remained in the exact same position, continually stared directly at him. There was no sound of an animal crashing through the brush or no visible movement among the trees. The being did not charge him, but it also made no attempt to retreat. It appeared completely unaffected by the shotgun blast. That lack of reaction frightened him more than the original scream. He realized he might be facing something that was not a normal animal and possibly not anything that could be physically harmed. He returned to the farmhouse deeply shaken. The encounter continued to disturb him long after that night. Now, at some point, he underwent a form of regression in an attempt to recover additional memories or understand what had happened at the tree line. The process apparently had a devastating effect on him. Shortly after the regression, the man experienced a complete mental breakdown. According to those who knew him, he was never entirely the same again. He became convinced that the yellow-eyed entity had somehow attached itself to his life and had caused lasting psychological and spiritual damage. And until the day he died, he blamed the encounter for destroying his peace of mind and ultimately ruining his life. Whatever stood near the Tennessee tree line was never identified. The memory of those elevated human-like eyes and the being's complete lack of reaction to the shotgun blast remain with him for the rest of his life. Now, the 8 reports presented tonight represented different regions, witnesses, time periods, and types of unexplained phenomena. Yet, several patterns connect them. Multiple witnesses experienced the unmistakable sensation of being watched before they located the entity. The Cherokee Devil witness heard howls and knocks around her homestead before seeing the whitish-gray creature near the creek. The young witness in eastern Tennessee felt watched after encountering the enormous black canine. The Antioch witness sensed an unseen presence before discovering that the cloaked humanoid crouched in the treetops. Several entities appeared to possess human-like intelligence. The Perry County creature stopped and listened when the witness spoke to it. The Roan Mountain giant approached silently, vocalized at close range, and may have communicated approval or recognition. The cloaked entity reacted to the witness's pursuit, stopped when he stopped, and deliberately looked back at him. The red-eyed creature in the abandoned town used its hands in a careful, purposeful manner, almost as if it was searching for a specific object. Other reports involved apparent violations of normal physical behavior. The Roan Mountain giant seemed to step through an opening in reality. The Antioch entity moved across the branches that should not have supported its weight. The white reptilian creature spun in a rapidly rotating form and vanished beneath the vehicle without impact. And the Jonesborough being remained completely unaffected after a shotgun was fired directly between its eyes. Time and perception also played a role. The Roan Mountain witness believed that it had been outside for approximately 20 minutes, but nearly an hour had passed. The occupants of the vehicle near Roan Mountain felt that time slowed or stopped as the white creature approached them. Emotional and psychological effects appeared in several cases. Some witnesses experienced overwhelming dread before the entity appeared. Others suffered long-term anxiety, fear of the woods, emotional distress, or mental breakdowns after their encounter. These reactions may result from the trauma of seeing something that should not exist. However, we must also consider whether certain entities are capable of influencing human perception, emotion, or neurological activity. Tennessee's landscape provides an ideal setting for unexplained encounters. The state contains isolated mountain communities, extensive forests, cave systems, abandoned settlements, waterways, ridges, and areas with generations of indigenous and Appalachian lore. There are places where old traditions, modern witness reports, and unexplained physical events seem to overlap. Are these beings native to the Tennessee wilderness? Do they move through the landscape unseen until the chance encounter exposes them? Are they physical animals, supernatural entities, interdimensional visitors, or manifestations connected to the land itself? We may not have definitive answers. What we do have are witnesses who continue to carry the memory of those encounters years or even decades later. They remember the eyes, they remember the movement, they remember the silence. Most of all, they remember the realization that something was watching them from the darkness. This has been Unexplained Tennessee. Now, please subscribe to Phantoms of Monsters Radio, activate the notifications, and share this presentation with others interested in the unexplained. If you have experienced something unexplained in Tennessee or elsewhere, I encourage you to document every detail you remember. Even details that initially seem insignificant may become important when compared with other reports. And you can submit your account directly to Phantoms of Monsters. Witness confidentiality and anonymity will be respected when requested. If you send a chat donation this evening, your consideration is much appreciated. Your support helps us continue documenting witness testimony, investigating unusual incidents, and preserving these accounts for future research. So if you have a question, please place it in all caps, and I will try to answer as best I can for you. Michelle, do you think the reptilian creature was actually hurt and that's why it landed in the road the way it did, possibly looking for help? I have no idea. Honestly, I haven't heard of anything similar to that, though I have heard of another large reptilian creature on Roan Mountain years previous to that. So I don't know. I don't know what the whole deal was with this creature. I do believe they saw something, and I mean, since all three of them saw it, so it's hard to tell what it was. Michelle, do you think the being crouched in the trees was extraterrestrial, or do you think it was possibly a vampire? I think it was what we consider to be a glimmer man, maybe an ultra terrestrial being, could be an extraterrestrial. We just don't know what they are. Um, that's why we continue to collect these reports about this phenomena. Hopefully, we will get reports that will shine a little more light and maybe a little more theory as to what people are really seeing. Paranormalism Net, tell us about Through the Woods, the Cryptids of Pennsylvania. Oh, well, this is a documentary that I'm working with some filmmakers in York, Pennsylvania. It's been going on for about a year now. They were at a presentation that Rissa Miller and I did about a year ago, and then they wanted me to discuss the Mothman, the winged humanoid, and the other winged humanoid sightings in South Central Pennsylvania, as well as my Bigfoot encounter down in Maryland. So I don't know when it's going to be coming out, but there's other researchers and investigators in this area that are part of it as well. So it should be a very interesting doc. Sir Wolf, how long? Glimmer man on top of the trees, thin branches make no sense. Could it be an astral form that is bleeding into this plane? Semi-present, what's your take on it? It very well could be. I mean, it could be a light being of some type. It could be an apparition, a manifestation that just takes a more spirit form when it comes through to this plane. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. We wrote the book. We're probably going to do another one eventually. We keep collecting these accounts, and we'll just have to wait and see. Dagnammit, have you heard of the stag king of Hermitage, a large buck with a human face that lives on the property with other deer? Haven't heard of that one. If you had an account, send it to me. I appreciate it. It's the same question. Can Squatch, have you been getting more reports since you posted a call for more winged humanoid sightings on your community tab? If so, have any been surprising, different than ones in the past? I'm probably getting a few more reports, but honestly, the content and descriptions are very similar to what we've had. You know, after we did the Netflix presentation, we received about 130 reports directly from Unsolved Mysteries. Well, I did receive them, and I started looking into them. And then I gave Tobias some to look at. We got a lot of worldwide reports. About 30 came from the Chicagoland area. This phenomena is a worldwide phenomena. I mean, and many times the reports and the descriptions are very similar. James Borg, any known stories from the Knoxville area, Lon? Yeah, it could be, but I can't remember them offhand. I can't think offhand of what the only thing I have ever gotten from Knoxville, which you may be interested, you and Ray, are some UFO sightings have had for several years around there. Mostly what we call these plasma-like beings, plasma-like craft that kind of shape-shift while they're flying. Many of them were donut-shaped with a hole in the middle. So if you're interested, I had to dig them out. I mean, I know you went through the site or went through some of the stuff for the book. So I don't know if you saw it there or not. Dagnammit, there's a cryptid in Tennessee called the Chicasella. Have you heard of that? No, I haven't heard of that one either. Again, you got any information, please send it to me. Michelle, do you think that the being that went through the portal with the green glow after observing the man watching the moon was a hybrid, half human? I don't know. I think it was probably a Bigfoot, just from the description and from other reports I have received. We get a lot of these reports where people see these things vanish like they're going through a rift. That's not unusual. We get a lot of those, and it's just not in Tennessee. It's in a lot of places. Tyler, 420. In Tennessee, there's a cryptid that not many people talk about, and it's called the barilla. Have you heard of the creature? Yeah, I have heard of that. And there's a similar creature up in South Dakota, too, that has been messing with some of the folks on some of the reservations in South Dakota as well. And it's kind of like a bear human like being. I'd say a bear, Bigfoot human like being. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but I do specifically remember sightings of those. Jose Sanchez, could their strange non-reaction behavior be staring back at people, be that or genuinely confused or even amused by people's behavior? I've heard a lot of that. I think when they stare at people, any cryptid, any being itself, I think a lot of it is surprised that they're starting to realize that people are actually seeing them. And they're probably as surprised as the human witnesses are. But we do hear a lot of that. Michelle, do you think the Cherokee Devil understood that the family was just there to live and not intend to change or destroy the land, and that's why he didn't attack them? Sure, I think he understood the intention, especially when they were feeding dead animals to it, and just not disturbing it. I mean, she had the gun, didn't shoot it or anything like that. She tried to calm it down. Thunderstorm, thank you for the, what was the question again? Have you ever heard of Nordic aliens? Yeah, we have. Tall whites. In fact, I did a report about tall whites today on the blog. And some of the encounters that Charles Hill had with the tall whites. But yeah, I've heard several Nordic alien encounters. Allie Staring, Lon, any word from Larry Arnold at SHC? I haven't heard from him in a long time. I have not heard of him in a long time. Can Squatch, any cryptid reports tied to caves in Tennessee? Yeah, there are. Most of the reports I get from caves in the southwest part of the country involve reptilian-like beings or something very similar to what extraterrestrials have been described as well as feral people. I mean, are also pale humanoids. Paul in New York City. Lon, are you still working with Shorter to Cook? I haven't heard from Delise in about a year and a half. She is a filmmaker. She has done a lot of work over the years with Alan Jackson, and she was part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy too. She did a lot of work on that. I don't know if she's working on a project now, but this isn't unusual for her. I mean, she can go missing for a year or two at a time. But I haven't heard. I've tried to contact her and as before, but she usually shows up eventually. Can Squatch, what about Oak Ridge Government Facility? Any reports from that area? Yeah, I do. I do have one. I'll just have to wait for the next Tennessee report. And if you search that in the archive, it should pull up. It was about I think it was a cryptid canine or some type of creature like that. Okay, folks. Well, I want to thank you for coming in here tonight. Much appreciated. I want to again thank everyone for joining me this evening. I'm grateful for your continued interest and support of the channel. So until next time, please remain observant, trust your instincts, and remember that the world around us may be far stranger than what we've been led to believe. So have a nice evening. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday. Good night.